Cảm ơn Christine. Và sau đây thì tôi xin được gửi đến quý vị cuộc phỏng vấn của phóng viên Caroline đã ngồi xuống nói chuyện với đạo diễn Marc về cuốn phim tài liệu rất là cảm động mang tên 3.5 minutes, 10 bullets, tạm dịch là 3 phút rưỡi, 10 viên đạn. Xin được gửi đến quý vị cuộc phỏng vấn đặc biệt mà Caroline đã có mặt ở trên thành phố LA nói chuyện với đạo diễn Marc về phim tài liệu 3.5 minutes, 10 bullets.
This is Caroline, and I'm here with Marc Silver. He is the director of the documentary 3.5 Minutes. This movie was so compelling.
Thank you.
And it has already won many awards at the Sundance Film Festival. Can you just give us a little bit about your film?
Yeah, so the film is about this tragic moment where two cars pulled up next to each other in a gas station car park in Jacksonville, Florida. And in this tiny amount of time, 3.5 minutes, an argument ensued between a 45-year-old white guy called Michael Dunn and a 17-year-old black guy, Jordan Davis. And 3.5 minutes later, 10 bullets were fired and Jordan Davis was killed.
I have to ask, how far along in the process was the trial or the investigation when you became involved in this film?
So we began the film about 6 months after the shooting, which was about 6 months before the trial. And we actually met Jordan's parents a couple of weeks before the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin verdict.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we spent those first 6 months just on and off spending time with Lucy and Ron, Jordan's parents, in places where Jordan hung out. We met his friends, his girlfriend, the other boys who were in the car with him at the time, who fortunately none of the bullets hit. And then slowly we then got permission to be the camera inside the courtroom to film the trial of the killer. We then spent further kind of month or two in Jacksonville during the trial, and then about 8 or 9 months after that editing the film.
I don't know what the racial tensions are overseas, but, you know, coming into this, what was your insight, or, you know, from an outsider looking in to what is played out?
I think in many ways, you know, I was lucky in the sense that perhaps I had a wider or different perspective, not being from the US. But I think what I was able to see in the film, or through the film, was how strangely Michael Dunn, although obviously as an individual in the film, he came to represent something much bigger about race in the US. And we basically got access to some phone calls that he'd made between himself and his fiancée from prison, where he talked so much about his views on race, and highly racist views, but he himself, he doesn't speak about them like he's conscious of the fact that he's in any way racist. And he still really believes that he's very hard done by, that he was found guilty for this shooting. And I think in a strange way, Michael Dunn came to represent this kind of idea that the US doesn't want to talk about or acknowledge issues of racism a lot of the time. And through, from Trayvon through to, you know, whoever the latest person is that's been killed, you know, because there's been a huge amount of people since we began this film. But then the film became something bigger than just these 3.5 minutes, and these 3.5 minutes could have been the 1.5 seconds it took to kill Tamir Rice, or the 4 hours that Michael Brown lay on the ground in Ferguson. And suddenly, I think we learned that the DNA of those 3.5 minutes, the fact that a white guy felt fear because of seeing 4 black teenagers, that same DNA in that of that moment was in all these other subsequent cases.
In engaging with Jordan's parents, you know, how was that initial meeting? I mean, very sensitive subject. Their son, you know, had just passed 6 months earlier. How was that approaching them and asking them, you know, their permission to do a documentary about what had happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hugely
almost invasive in a way.
Yeah, it feels invasive. It's hugely sensitive ground to tread, and I was, you know, lucky enough that Jordan's parents were open to having that conversation at that particular time, and I think we just slowly built up, you know, trust, and almost like had, you know, built up a relationship between us that we still have today. And you know, we always spoke about if we could get this film right, it would hopefully inspire conversations that they themselves were starting to have with when it came to, for example, so when Jordan was killed, Trayvon's dad called Jordan's dad, and there's this terrible scene in the film where he welcomes him to this club that no parent wants to be a part of. So the fact that Jordan's parents were starting to have those conversations anyway, I think they saw that if they could have a film made about Jordan, then those conversations would be amplified around America, and maybe people would start speaking about these issues that are, you know, hugely necessary to be speaking about right now.
Thank you very much. This, like I said, a very compelling documentary. It was great work. Congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Xin quý vị khán thính giả vẫn tiếp tục giữ màn hình SBTN. Chúng tôi sẽ trở lại trong giây lát.